In 3, 2, 1. Whoa!
They've tested everything from Nazi bombs to that damn ocean liner door, but just how accurate have the MythBusters findings been? From bad math to budget constraints to just good old-fashioned mistakes.
There it goes. It's heading towards the ramp. Or not.
Every once in a while, even Adam and Jamie got stuff wrong.
I heard it go.
If you're talking about controversial MythBuster results, there's no getting around the 2004 chicken gun episode. This is actually a long-standing method used to test bird strike impacts on aircraft.
Give us a countdown then.
2, 3, 1.
It involves a cannon-like contraption powered by compressed air that delivers high-speed payloads of foam, other materials, or even actual chickens to test the impact resistance of various aircraft materials. The question for the MythBusters: was a frozen chicken more damaging than a thawed one? At the time, they found that thawed birds were just as destructive as their frozen counterparts, seemingly busting the myth.
If anything, the thawed chicken leaves a bigger hole.
But things got tricky. So tricky, in fact, that the MythBusters revisited it just months later. The major problem was, in the original test, Adam, Jamie, and the rest of the team hadn't used the type of airline glass meant to withstand such strikes. This time, they approached the problem from another angle, using multiple panes of glass, and upon firing the chicken gun at the target, counted how many broke per attempt.
It appears the frozen chicken has far more penetrating power than the thawed chicken.
Can a car bumper explode? Well, yes.
I sense a car fire in our near future.
But how far will it fly? We have reasonably reliable accounts of pressurized car bumpers taking short flights under certain conditions. This isn't really even a myth, as firefighters have occasionally witnessed such a thing happening. And the MythBusters confirmed it in an interview with a firefighter who was injured when an airborne bumper flew at her while fighting a car fire.
Broke both bones, the tibia and the fibula. The tibia was broken in about 20 pieces.
Okay, a bumper equipped with pressurized components like shock absorbers can pop off during car fires, but can it fly 50 feet, as rumor had it? They were unable to produce such dramatic results in their tests, deeming the myth busted.
Our pistons are still there.
But the bumper is melted.
But was it really? To some, the 50-yard benchmark may have seemed arbitrary. Does hitting that specific data point really matter when the original myth wasn't necessarily calling for a bumper to be flung the length of a house or two down a residential street? Some have since argued that the MythBusters got it mostly wrong by focusing so much on those 50 feet and instead should change their busted judgment to a more accurate plausible.
I feel a rumble in my soul.
Back in 2013, MythBusters aired an entire special dedicated to Indy cars. One involved the myth that, in a road race, a sufficiently fast vehicle can create enough force to lift manhole covers off the road. With the help of racer Logan Gomez and a weighted plastic cover, they tested the idea. Though the manhole cover did budge a little when Gomez drove over it at speeds of over 100 miles per hour, the MythBusters nevertheless called the whole thing busted. But physics indicates that it might be possible under just the right conditions. That's because a car isn't really pulling the manhole cover up, but reducing the air pressure on top.
As the air underneath the car gets funneled faster, it causes the air pressure to drop, helping the car to stick to the road.
The air below pushes upward and maybe moves the cover. With enough pressure beneath and a sufficiently fast car above, it could theoretically happen. Of course, we're talking about speeds in excess of 400 miles an hour, but maybe there's another answer in the form of Formula One cars. These mega-fast vehicles may not quite get so speedy. They've topped out at just over 234 miles per hour, but are designed to maximize ground effect, essentially keeping the atmospheric pressure beneath the car as close to zero as possible. Maybe, just maybe, a different car could overturn the busted verdict. Road spikes may seem like a surefire tactic for foiling a dramatic car chase in a spy movie, but would they actually stop a car in a real-world pursuit? That was a question in the 2010 MythBusters episode Spy Car Escape. In a mock chase, Adam in the lead car scattered a handful of road spikes. While the pursuit car took some damage, it didn't take effect quickly enough and Adam was caught. The team concluded that the solid spikes actually helped to keep air in the tires. In 2015, MythBusters returned to the case in unfinished business. This time, Adam put together 50 revamped road spikes made from hollow tubes and painted neon pink to show up against the road. Like the previous solid spikes, these were constructed of two 90-degree segments welded together, ensuring that no matter how the spikes were deployed, a pointy end would always land facing up, ready to puncture a tire. The new spikes punched holes in a tire, and pretty dramatically too. This time, Adam was in the pursuit vehicle while Jamie deployed the spikes. Within seconds, all four of his vehicle's tires were flat and even coming away from the rims, making driving all but impossible. The MythBusters admitted they'd gotten it wrong and gave the myth the new verdict of confirmed. So, what are you supposed to do when a tornado is bearing down on you? If you're a normal, sensible person, you take shelter as quickly as you can, ideally inside a sturdy building on the first floor and in an interior room away from any windows. But if you're a tornado chaser or a MythBuster meeting up with one for a good old-fashioned Discovery Channel cross-promotion, you park yourself in the face of danger, or in this case, right in the path of a jet engine's exhaust on storm-chasing myths. Here, the MythBusters took on the idea of personal tornado shelters. Could someone really whip out a shelter and survive an F3 tornado? After small-scale testing, the MythBusters came up with a collapsible affair carried backpack style. Jamie was confident enough to be the test subject and anchored the shelter in the path of said jet engine. On the first test, the shelter began to peel away at 135 miles per hour, but a quick redesign and do-over pushed that to 180 miles per hour. But that engine only blasted air in one direction. Tornadoes are massively powerful storms that move in a circular pattern. Just ask the cow from Twister. What's more, they can change their overall direction at any time. How would the shelter hold up if the air suddenly began moving from the side? How indeed. The MythBusters, perhaps wisely, declined to test this possibility, even at the expense of learning what actually happens if you get sucked up by a tornado.
Wow, look at that!
Mr. Hitler's in three rather large chunks.
Operation Valkyrie, which inspired the movie Valkyrie, involved an attempt to kill Hitler with a bomb on July 20, 1944. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg was chosen to plant the bomb at Hitler's Polish command center, known as the Wolf's Lair. Stauffenberg was to leave an explosive-filled suitcase beneath a meeting table in an underground bunker, as close as possible to Hitler. But it was summertime, so the meeting was moved above ground for better air circulation. Also, only one explosive was armed, and someone unwittingly moved it away from Hitler. The bomb went off and killed 4, but Hitler survived.
The blast blew a lot of Hitler's clothes off, such was the magnitude of it.
The MythBusters attempted to recreate the explosion in both an above-ground bunker and an underground one. Would Hitler have been killed by a pressure wave in a reinforced subterranean space? Initial tests suggested yes, but a full-scale test, complete with a styrofoam Führer, showed he could have survived. But not so fast. Viewers quickly identified some issues.
Building a bunker might be more dangerous than blowing it up.
The team used metal shipping containers, not great stand-ins for the deeper multi-room underground Wolf's Lair complex. Not to mention that one of the containers began to collapse as it was buried and was hurriedly replaced and half covered. That container was sealed with a stack of railroad ties. The whole experiment was problematic.
I'm engaged in personal combat with a creature apparently called a Gorn. He's immensely strong.
First seen in the 1967 Star Trek The Original Series episode Arena, the so-called Gorn cannon appears after Captain Kirk is transported to a desolate planet to face off against the lizard-like Gorn captain. After a few rounds of tussling, Kirk manages to assemble a cannon with what looks like a large bamboo tube, some rope, explosive minerals, and a few spare diamonds he's found lying around. He fires, shows mercy to the downed Gorn, and manages to get back to the Enterprise more or less unscathed. The build team built their own Gorn cannon in 2009's Mini Myth Mayhem episode. Using bamboo, rope, and homemade gunpowder, they fired it with sobering results. While the Gorn stand-in was fine, the stunt Kirk was down for the count. A second test with a reinforced barrel was even worse. The build team concluded that the myth was busted. Was it really? Swiss chemist Ulrich Bretscher did a lot of digging and concluded that Kirk's ersatz gunpowder recipe could work, assuming he'd gotten the right sort of charcoal, mixed it up in the right proportions, and found a particularly strong piece of extraterrestrial bamboo. What's more, 2 YouTubers built their own Gorn cannon and showed that it was possible to fire without the bamboo disintegrating.
My first day on the job, they give you all the safety tips and the warnings, and that's the very first thing they tell you not to do.
Longtime MythBusters fans know about the notion that peeing on the electrified third rail of subway or train tracks could result in deadly electrocution. One of the very earliest episodes of the show had Adam and Jamie setting a more or less anatomically correct dummy to stream liquid onto an electrified train rail. Because everyone's always wondered, can you pee on one of these things?
They found in normal circumstances, there's no way a fatal current can jump up a urine stream.
While it was technically possible, the stream quickly broke into separate non-conducting droplets, meaning a person would have to get comically close to the rail for the myth to work. But a look at the literature potentially undermines this. Some modern reports indicate that individuals have died while attempting to urinate on the third rail of New York City subway lines. In the 1960s, New York City medical examiner Dr. Milton Helpburn alleged that a man named Patrick O'Malley, found dead on a subway track with telltale burns on his hands and privates, was killed in precisely that manner. But some of the details concerning O'Malley's Irish heritage and love of alcohol hint that this tale is discriminatory and at least partially embellished. Even the MythBusters themselves called their earlier results into question. In Myths Revisited, they maintained that their electric rail conclusion held, and set up a mini electric fence in the shop. Adam stepped forward and learned through personal experience that a hearty stream delivered from a near enough spot would indeed deliver a small but most definitely noticeable shock.
If you're playing a video game that is representing a real-world skill, can the video game make you better at that actual skill?
In Unfinished Business, Adam and Jamie drew upon their previous experiences in the show's video game special, but instead of breaking out their Doom cosplay again, the pair decided to play golf. Specifically, Adam and Jamie, neither of whom had ever played golf at that point, decided to see if they could improve their skills. Adam would take one-on-one lessons with a golf pro, while Jamie would practice his swing using a video game setup. Would they improve on their admittedly unimpressive control round? Adam knocked 10 strokes off his control, while Jamie's only improved by 2. A deeper look at the mechanics of their golf swing showed marked improvement in Adam's technique, too, while Jamie's apparently lagged. Therefore, the notion that video games might improve your real-world skills was busted. But since then, further research has undermined that conclusion. Anecdotally, numerous professional athletes have said that they use video games to up their skills, from scoping out opponents' tactics in multiplayer games like FIFA to more generally working on fast-paced problem-solving. Similarly, a study published in Cognitive Training found that some video games could boost an athlete's adaptability, while others, like a 2014 paper in Human Movement Science and a 2021 study in Presidia Computer Science, showed measurable improvements in coordination, response times, and tracking amongst some gamers. When it starts to rain, is it better to hustle your way indoors, or could stubbornly continuing to walk somehow keep more rain off your body? It sounds almost too obvious to test. Surely running gives raindrops less time to land on you. But the MythBusters took on the problem anyway, with surprising results. In the original test, the MythBusters found that running means you actually take on more water, confirming the notion that it's better to just keep strolling when a rain shower hits. But there were some flaws in that first run-through. First of all, Jamie and Adam used an artificial rain machine during the test, which many viewers argued didn't properly replicate the conditions of a sudden weather event. Sure, Jamie may have initially argued for more controlled conditions, but perhaps they were modifying the conditions too far to get a reliable conclusion. Other scientists have reached different conclusions over the years, including the argument that wind conditions could dramatically affect your choice and outcomes, though you'll still get wet no matter your speed. Nobody's that fast. As for the MythBusters, they admitted the original test was wonky enough that it required a redo, so in MythBusters Revisited, they managed to run it again during an actual rainstorm. This time, they saw that running kept a subject somewhat drier than walking, turning their first conclusion on its head. In the MythBusters Zombie Special, Adam and Jamie found themselves facing off against a zombie horde. The pair wondered, is it better to take them out using a gun or an axe?
Well, they are fictional.
That doesn't mean we can't test with them, though.
Adam took up a foam-tipped prop axe while Jamie used a paintball pistol, and approaching zombies, really living volunteers, wore face masks. Adam dispatched an average of 14 undead before he was bitten, while Jamie managed 7, leading to validation for the pro axe crowd. To be fair, the duo eventually revisited the myth in the MythBusters Volunteer Special. Adam enlisted the help of an electronics expert, an accelerometer, some other gadgets, a real axe, and a human head analog to calculate the speed and force necessary for proper skull cracking. Without the correct force, the axe wouldn't register a kill, and Adam would have to try it again. In the retest, zombies initially got through a small break in a fence, then breached a larger section, as opposed to the original test in which Adam and Jamie were surrounded. Adam eventually got tired and was overtaken, but Jamie's paintball gun attempt still fell short. But with a better shot? Sorry, Jamie, have a higher success rate? Did their force calculations hold up? After all, research published in the Journal of Neurosurgery found that catastrophic skull failure requires about 520 pounds of force. And that's not taking into consideration the fact that zombies are already sort of dead.
What happens if you take this physics thought experiment into the real world?
Sailing with a fan is another MythBusters escapade that sounds far too obvious to warrant an actual test. But upon putting the idea through its paces on Blow Your Own Sail, the team found that you could actually do just that. If you happen to be in a becalmed sailboat, you might just be able to break out a handy, big fan to get things moving again. That's what the build team found, though it took some finagling to get a strong enough fan and a big enough sail to make things move. and the full-scale test only got a boat to crawl forward at 3 miles per hour. But while the build team's confirmed verdict wasn't strictly wrong, viewers noted that their technique of pointing the fan straight at the sail may have skewed the results. That's because sails are meant to catch the wind at an angle, which allows the sail to essentially inflate and create a shape similar to an airplane wing. This generates a force not unlike lift, only on a more vertical plane. This is what allows sailing vessels to move into winds, even though it may initially seem as if the crew will have to break out the oars to get anything done. Perhaps the build team was yet again hampered by budget or time constraints, but it would have been interesting to see if a few changes of angle got them a more impressive result. The basic story of this perennial myth hinges on the tale of a death ray designed by Greek inventor Archimedes, who's said to have created some sort of glass-based weapon in 2012 BC that repelled Roman invaders of Syracuse. Most have since concluded that if it was real, this weapon was some sort of reflective contraption that would have concentrated the sun's beams into one powerful, potentially fire-starting ray. The MythBusters first tested it in 2004 when they concluded that the mirror would have had to be comically large, and even then would have only created a moderately warm spot. They revisited the myth a couple of years later, where it was once again busted.
I'm hoping that we can take one more crack at it.
This time, the test included 500 high school volunteers attempting to coordinate and focus their mirrors on a mock ship. Yet again, busted. Case closed then, right? Well, the MythBusters were hardly the first to test this concept, and they certainly were not the last. In 2024, an Ontario student, Brendan Centre, made waves with a science experiment in which he used small concave mirrors to focus the rays of a heat lamp onto a miniature target. He found that the temperature of the target increased with the addition of each mirror and suggested that, with larger mirrors and a larger heat source, like, say, the sun, ignition would be possible. The Ivampa solar electric generating system did something very similar in California's Mojave Desert, using computer-controlled beams to precisely track the sun and focus its rays on receiving towers, but it closed after 11 years as competing solar energy technologies got cheaper.
Duct tape and bubble pack, the choice for all discerning survivors.
The Duct Tape Canyon special was already a bit far-fetched, beginning with Jamie and Adam en route to a formal event in their vintage car breaking down in the desert. The tuxedo-clad duo happened to have an inexhaustible supply of duct tape and bubble wrap, which they used to make it back to civilization. This includes surviving chilly nights outdoors and navigating Class 5 rapids on custom-built rafts. But the point where fans got tied up concerns rope. Specifically, to get to those rapids, Adam and Jamie rappelled down a nasty-looking rock face using DIY duct tape ropes.
We had an extra safety for that one. We added a safety, even though we felt really confident about our rope.
Having a safety line is highly sensible, but the issue with this test goes deeper. The MythBusters concluded that it was possible to rappel using a duct tape rope, and that they never actively put weight on the backup rope, but fans aren't so sure. Online, some argued that they felt duped by the lack of clarity, as the backup rope was also covered in duct tape. Others wondered if the way Adam and Jamie were sitting in their harnesses indicated that they were at least sometimes putting weight on the safety line. That's speculative, of course, and understanding just how weight was loaded on what rope is difficult to verify from viewing the episode alone. Perhaps if this were tested in the MythBusters shop with more controlled and transparent results, their claims would stand on more solid ground. Can you really defeat a breathalyzer test even if you're thoroughly in your cups? Probably not, and you definitely shouldn't try. Yet when the MythBusters took on the supposed myth, keen-eyed viewers noticed some curious exclusions. It all went down in 2003 when an episode featured Adam and Jamie getting soused under police supervision. With a police officer administering a breathalyzer test, they attempted to artificially lower its reading of their blood alcohol levels. These included holding pennies in the mouth, eating an onion, and going hard on the breath mints. Nothing worked, leading to a conclusion of busted. But breathalyzers aren't perfect. They work because the ethanol in your drink gets into your bloodstream and eventually your lungs, where it's expelled on your breath. A breathalyzer uses a beam of infrared light or fuel gas sensors to measure that ethanol and determine if you're over the legal blood alcohol limit. But these devices typically have a wide margin of error that can produce false positives. Any alcohol still in someone's mouth can also boost the readings, even if they've just taken a swig and aren't impaired yet. Certain medical conditions like diabetes and acid reflux can also elevate readings. Hyperventilating might just fool the device, only the cop would surely notice your weird breathing pattern, and having astronomically high blood alcohol levels will nullify this too. Ultimately, it's understandable why the MythBusters might have skipped mentioning this, as no one wants to encourage drunk driving.
I am indeed James frickin' Cameron.
If there's one myth that goes beyond even MythBusters in terms of cultural cachet, it's the one that has to do with a certain door, specifically the infamous floating one, which was actually a piece of door frame, seen at the climax of James Cameron's 1997 epic Titanic. Fans have been arguing for decades as to whether or not Jack and Rose could have both fit on that door and survived. Naturally, the MythBusters got involved. At the behest of Cameron himself, they began testing the buoyancy of the piece of wood, as well as the risk of hypothermia. Then the duo got into their dry suits and took to a local waterway with a replica door frame and one period-accurate life vest. Jamie played Rose, of course. On nearly every attempt, they found that Jack was doomed.
Science is on my side.
His only reprieve came when Jamie/Rose took off the life preserver and secured it beneath the door, boosting its buoyancy. Therefore, the MythBusters found that under just the right conditions, Jack could have crammed himself onto the door alongside Rose. Years later, Cameron retested the situation in the National Geographic special Titanic 25 years later. Stunt doubles in a chilly pool found that the life jacket trick was actually pretty tricky. Cameron found another solution, but he cautioned that there were many variables that could make it all go wrong. He concluded, "Based on what I know today, I would have made the raft smaller."